The galaxy had once been a place of peace and prosperity, ruled by the Galactic Coalition. This grand alliance, formed by species from hundreds of planets, had long ensured stability and cooperation across the stars. The Coalition brought together advanced civilizations, each with its own strengths and knowledge. It was a shining example of unity, a testament to what species could achieve when they worked together. But all of that changed when the Krix arrived. The Krix were a mysterious alien race, their origin unknown. Their ships appeared out of nowhere, sleek and terrifying, moving with unnatural speed. At first, the Coalition thought it was a minor threat, something they could quickly resolve. But the Krixes were unlike anything anyone had ever encountered. Their technology was far beyond that of the Coalition, their weapons devastatingly powerful. They came without warning, sweeping through entire systems, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. The first battle was a massacre. The Coalition's fleets, which had once been the pride of the galaxy, were obliterated in hours. The Krix didn't just destroy ships, they destroyed entire cities, whole worlds. They didn't care about the value of life, the rich histories of the civilizations they crushed. For the Krix, it was all about conquest, about breaking the will of the galaxy's people. Planet after planet fell. The Coalition's forces fought back, but each battle was harder than the last. The Krix had no mercy, and their numbers seemed endless. The Coalition began to break apart. The smaller species, those who had not been as advanced, were the first to fall. Then, the larger planets started to feel the weight of the Krix onslaught. Nothing seemed to stop them. The people of the galaxy, once united, began to lose hope. Leaders tried to rally their forces, but even they could see the truth. The Krix could not be stopped. The messages of defiance grew weaker as more worlds were lost. Desperation settled in, and the Coalition's once grand unity was replaced by fear and uncertainty. Among the remaining leaders of the Coalition, there was one that refused to give up hope. Admiral Solara, a veteran of many battles. She had seen the loss of countless lives, the destruction of entire civilizations, but she could not accept that the galaxy was doomed. She knew that if the Krix were to be stopped, it had to be now, before they consumed everything. In a quiet, dimly lit room on the last surviving Coalition flagship, Admiral Solara sat alone, her eyes fixed on the holographic map in front of her. It was a map of the galaxy, but it looked different now. The bright lights of flourishing worlds were gone, replaced by empty spaces, dark patches where once thriving civilizations had stood. The Krix's red marks were everywhere. They had taken almost everything. She could feel the weight of it, the loss of so many, the weight of all the suffering. She had lost friends, comrades, and even planets she once called allies. It seemed hopeless, and for a moment, she allowed herself to wonder if there was any future left for the galaxy at all. But then a thought crossed her mind. It was a long shot, one she had hesitated to even consider. But as she stared at the dark, empty spaces on the map, she knew that the Coalition's only chance was a desperate one. There was a planet on the far edge of the galaxy, a small, insignificant world called Earth. The species there were primitive, even by the standards of the Coalition, but she had heard rumors of their resilience, their creativity. Could they possibly help? Admiral Solara didn't know for sure, but she had no choice but to try. She sent the message, a simple, direct plea for help. Humanity, we need you. As soon as the message was broadcast, she knew that the galaxy had reached its last hope. If Earth, with its untested, young species, couldn't help, then no one could. The message traveled across space, through the dark void, toward the blue and green planet at the edge of the galaxy. It was a faint hope, but it was all they had left. Back on Earth, life continued as normal, unaware of the galaxy's crisis. But soon, they would learn that their future, and the future of the entire galaxy, was about to change forever. The message was sent, simple, direct, and filled with the weight of desperation. Humanity, we need you. It was all the Galactic Coalition could offer. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where the last lights of hope were flickering out, this message found its way to Earth, a planet thought to be too distant, too young, and too small to matter in the grand sweep of galactic affairs. And yet, it was their only hope. Admiral Solera sat in the dark command room aboard the Coalition flagship, waiting. There was nothing more she could do. She had sent the message, and now, all she could do was wait for a response. She stared at the flickering hologram of the galaxy, watching as the Krix ships continued to advance. The red marks were spreading, consuming everything in their path. Earth's leaders, meanwhile, were completely unaware of the galaxy's desperate plea. Life on Earth was, for the most part, as it had always been. People went about their daily routines, focusing on their own world's struggles. There was nothing unusual in the news, no signs that a galaxy-wide war was taking place. Governments had their own concerns: climate change, poverty, political unrest. Space exploration was a distant, almost forgotten dream for most. That was until the message came. The first signal arrived like any other, a strange series of pulses and noises from deep space. It was picked up by a small team of astronomers working at a research facility. At first, they thought it was just another cosmic event, something explainable, a comet passing by or a star fading into the black. But something about this signal was different. It was too regular, too structured. It wasn't random. Dr. Lena Torres, a young scientist at the facility, was the first to decode the message. She had spent years studying the stars, mapping out planets, and searching for signals from beyond Earth. It was her life's work. She had always hoped that one day a message would come, but never in her wildest dreams did she expect it to be like this. When she realized what the message was, her heart skipped a beat. It was a cry for help from another civilization, one that she couldn't even imagine. The language was unfamiliar, the symbols strange, but it was unmistakable. A desperate plea for humanity to come to the aid of a galaxy on the brink of collapse. At first, Dr. Torres thought it was a prank, maybe a hoax. But as she worked to verify the source of the message, she realized that it was real. The message had traveled across the vast emptiness of space, past stars and planets, through dangerous asteroid fields, and reached Earth, and it had a single word at its core: humanity. She immediately contacted her superiors, but the higher-ups were skeptical. They dismissed it as a strange anomaly, something that would fade into obscurity like so many other unexplainable signals. But Dr. Torres couldn't let go. She couldn't ignore the urgency in the message, the simple words that seemed to carry the weight of a dying galaxy. Days passed, and still, no one took her seriously. Earth's governments were busy with their own issues. But Dr. Torres, now joined by a handful of fellow scientists, pushed forward. They worked tirelessly to decode every detail of the message, trying to understand who or what was calling for help. Then, the world's attention was finally drawn to the message. It wasn't a grand announcement or a sudden discovery that changed everything. Instead, it came in the form of an unexpected broadcast. The news was running a story about the strange signal, and someone high up, noticed it. The message wasn't just a plea from another civilization. It was a request for humanity to intervene, to fight a war against an unstoppable enemy: the Krix. The word Krix sent a shiver down the spine of anyone who had heard it. It wasn't just a new threat. It was a force unlike anything Earth had ever known. A species bent on destruction, their fleets capable of wiping out entire planets. And now, they were destroying the Coalition, the great alliance of the galaxy. Humanity was their last hope. The news quickly spread. It didn't take long for Earth's governments to call for an emergency session of the United Nations. The world was in shock, torn between disbelief and the dawning reality of what was being asked of them. Could humanity, with all its flaws and weaknesses, really answer the call? Could they fight a battle on behalf of an entire galaxy? Could they save millions of lives? They didn't even know. But there was something else, a spark of hope. For as much as humanity had been divided in the past, there was a unity that came in times of great need. This message wasn't just a call to arms, it was a call to purpose. For the first time in centuries, the people of Earth looked beyond their borders, beyond their differences, and saw the possibility of something greater. Dr. Torres stood in front of a room full of world leaders. She had been the one to decode the message, and now she was part of the team tasked with making the impossible decision. Humanity has always been known for its resilience, she said, her voice steady but filled with determination. Now it's time to prove that we can stand up, not just for ourselves, but for the entire galaxy. The room fell silent. It was the moment of truth. Would Earth answer the call? And in that silence, a decision was made. After weeks of preparation, humanity's response to the call for help was finally ready. Earth's leaders had made the decision to send a small but powerful task force to the edge of the galaxy, where the Galactic Coalition was struggling to hold its ground against the Krix. The task force would consist of Earth's best soldiers, scientists, and engineers, along with a few trusted officers from the remaining Coalition species who had agreed to join the effort. As the ships prepared for launch, there was a mix of excitement and fear. The unknown stretched out before them like an endless void. None of the people on board the ships knew what awaited them. The Krix were known for their ruthless efficiency, and no one had been able to stop them. Yet, they had no choice but to try. The fleet of human ships, equipped with the latest technology Earth had to offer, left the planet's atmosphere, cutting through the sky and heading toward the distant stars. The journey would take months, but the crew was ready. They knew that their mission was more than just about saving a few worlds. It was about saving everything. The future of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. As they traveled through space, the humans couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. They had never been this far from their home planet before. The vastness of the universe was both beautiful and terrifying. The stars seemed so distant, and yet the humans knew that they were not alone in the darkness. They were headed toward something they couldn't yet fully comprehend. Upon arrival at the edge of the galaxy, the task force was greeted by a scene of utter devastation. The once thriving planets that had been part of the Galactic Coalition were now little more than ruined worlds. Buildings lay in ruins, cities were abandoned, and the skies were filled with the lingering remnants of destroyed ships. The Krix had left their mark everywhere they had gone. The humans were struck by the scale of the destruction. They had read about the Krix, but nothing could prepare them for the sight of what they had done. The devastation was unlike anything they had ever seen, and the horror of it all settled over them like a dark cloud. But there was no time for fear. The battle was still ongoing, and they had a mission to complete. As the human fleet entered the war zone, they were quickly met by what remained of the Coalition's forces. The few survivors were scattered across different planets, trying to hold on to what little they had left. It was clear that they were outmatched and outnumbered. The Krix had brought destruction not only through sheer force, but through the fear they instilled in those who faced them. Admiral Solara, who had survived the worst of the Krix attacks, greeted the humans with a mix of relief and uncertainty. She had heard rumors of humanity's bravery and determination, but she had no idea what to expect. What could a species that had never fought on this scale do against an enemy like the Krix? The humans, led by General Marcus Wren, stood ready. They were nervous, but they knew that this was their chance to prove that humanity was not just a small, insignificant species. They were determined to fight. The first battle would not be easy, but they were ready for it. General Wren, standing at the front of his team, addressed the assembled coalition forces. "We may not have the same technology or experience as you," he said, "but what we do have is something you've lost. Hope. We will fight. Together." The soldiers cheered, their voices filled with newfound energy. For the first time in a long while, there was a glimmer of hope in the eyes of the coalition forces. The humans had arrived. And with them, they'd brought something more than weapons or tactics. They'd brought the belief that they could win. As the battle began, the humans quickly proved that they weren't just another force to be swept aside. Their tactics were unconventional, their movements unpredictable. While the Krix relied on overwhelming force and advanced weaponry, the humans used their creativity and adaptability to outmaneuver them. They took advantage of the terrain, using the wreckage of destroyed ships as cover, and launching surprise attacks from unexpected angles. The Krix, accustomed to easily crushing their enemies, were caught off guard. Their ships and soldiers were formidable, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. The humans fought with a passion and resourcefulness that no one had anticipated. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something greater, the future of the galaxy. Despite the Krix's superior technology, the humans managed to push back their forces, even if only for a short time. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The humans had proven that they could fight back, that they weren't just helpless bystanders in this war. They had a place in the galaxy, and they were willing to defend it. As the battle raged on, Admiral Solara watched from the sidelines, amazed by the humans' ability to adapt and survive. She had seen many battles in her time, but this was something different. The Krix may have been the most powerful force the galaxy had ever seen, but humanity had something they didn't: the will to never give up. The battle was far from over, and the road ahead would be long and difficult. But for the first time in months, the coalition forces dared to believe that they might just have a chance at victory. The battle raged on across the war-torn planets of the Galactic Coalition. The human forces, though inexperienced compared to the Krix, had shown the galaxy something no one thought possible. They could fight. But even with their resourcefulness and determination, it was becoming clear that the Krix were unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. The Coalition's remaining forces were scattered, their fleets in disarray after months of relentless attacks. The Krix ships, sleek and powerful, moved with precision, cutting through defenses as though they were paper. Despite the humans' unexpected victories, the odds were still heavily stacked against them. General Marcus Ryan stood on the bridge of the human command ship, staring at the tactical displays. His face was grim, but his mind was sharp. The last few battles had been hard-fought. They had managed to hold their ground on a few planets, but the Krixes were relentless. Every time they pushed the enemy back, the Krixes regrouped and came at them even stronger. "We can't keep doing this forever," Ryan muttered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. Admiral Solara, who had joined the humans in their fight, looked at him with a mix of respect and concern. "We have to keep fighting, General. If we stop now, all of this, everything we fought for, will be lost. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every living thing in the galaxy." Ryan nodded, but the weight of her words did little to ease the pressure on his shoulders. The human forces were growing weary. Many of the soldiers had never expected to face such an overwhelming enemy, and the toll of the constant battles was taking its toll on morale. They had won a few battles, but the Krixes were still coming, and there were only so many tricks humanity could use before they ran out of options. That night, as Ryan lay in his quarters, trying to sleep, he thought about the war, about everything they had lost, about the people who had given everything to stop the Krix. He thought about Earth, about the world he had left behind, and about the message that had brought them here. It was a call to arms, but it was also a call to hope. And right now, hope seemed harder to find. But as he stared at the ceiling, a new thought began to form. It wasn't just their strength or their weapons that could make the difference. It was something else, something human that the Krix didn't understand. It was their ability to adapt, to think differently, to survive against all odds. The next day, General Ryan gathered his team. His plan was simple, but risky. The Krix relied on overwhelming power, yes, but they also had a predictable pattern. They moved like a force of nature, swift and decisive, but lacking in flexibility. If humanity could exploit that, they might just have a chance. "We know they're relentless," Ryan said, his voice steady. "But they've been pushing us into a corner. And when they push, they think we'll just break. They think we'll give up. But we won't. I have an idea. His plan wasn't about fighting fire with fire. It was about using the Crix's predictability against them. He ordered a small group of human ships to feign a retreat on a planet where the Crixes were gathering their forces. While the enemy chased them, the rest of the human fleet would ambush them from an unexpected angle, hitting their supply lines and cutting off their retreat. It was risky, but it was their best chance. If they could disrupt the Crix's flow of resources and supplies, it would weaken their forces, even if only for a short time. The humans put their plan into motion, executing it with a precision that surprised even their allies. The Crix, always used to being the hunters, found themselves on the defensive for the first time. The human forces struck quickly, taking out several key supply ships and disrupting the enemy's advance. The Crix were stunned. They had never expected such a move. The humans had turned their own strength, speed, and adaptability against them. It wasn't a victory, but it was a breakthrough. For the first time in the war, the Crixes were forced to pause, to rethink their strategy. And in that pause, humanity saw an opening. "We can do this," General Ryan said, a spark of hope in his eyes. "We're not just a footnote in this war. We're going to make a difference." Admiral Solera stood beside him, watching the unfolding battle. "You've shown them that you can fight. Now we just have to show them that you can win." The human forces continued to press their advantage, using the Crix's own tactics against them. It wasn't easy. The Crix had a vast fleet, and every victory came at a cost. But with each battle, humanity grew stronger. They learned from their mistakes, adapted to the enemy's strengths, and found new ways to turn the tide in their favor. For the first time in the war, the coalition began to believe that they might have a chance. They had seen the human ability to adapt, to think creatively, and to overcome even the most impossible odds. The Crix were powerful, yes, but they had underestimated humanity's strength. And now, the galaxy was beginning to see what the humans were capable of. The war was far from over. But in that moment, the humans had proved something important. They weren't just survivors. They were warriors, and they were ready to fight until the very end. The tide of battle had begun to shift, but the war was far from won. Despite their small victories, the human forces knew the Crix were still a massive threat. The few skirmishes they had won were encouraging, but the galaxy-wide war was far from over. Humanity had proved it could stand its ground, but the question remained, could they defeat the Crix? In the heart of the war zone, General Marcus Ryan sat in a strategy meeting with Admiral Solera and the remaining leaders of the Galactic Coalition. They had fought together, but it was becoming clear that humanity's new role in the war could be more than just a support force. They had the drive, the courage, and the ability to learn quickly. What they needed now was more resources, more alliances, and a clearer path to victory. "We need more than just strategy," Admiral Solera said, her voice heavy with concern. "We need numbers. We need the support of the other species in this galaxy. The Crix don't just threaten the coalition. They threaten everyone." General Ryan nodded. He understood her point. The Crix had already destroyed entire planets, wiping out entire civilizations. It wasn't just about saving the coalition now. It was about saving the galaxy. The problem was, not every species in the galaxy was willing to fight. "Some species are afraid," Ryan said, his voice grim. "They've already seen what the Crix can do. They don't want to risk their own survival." Solera looked at him, her eyes sharp with determination. "Then we make them understand. If we don't stop the Crixes now, there will be no one left to fight. We have to unite the galaxy, or we'll all fall." The conversation turned to the idea of forming a new alliance, one that went beyond a galactic coalition. Humanity had already proven itself, and it was time to convince other species that joining together was their only chance at survival. But convincing the galaxy's leaders would not be easy. Species were proud, and many had suffered greatly at the hands of the Cricks. Trust was something that would have to be earned. As the meeting ended, General Ryan found himself walking alone on the observation deck of the flagship, looking out at the stars. The vastness of space had never seemed so empty. It was a sobering reminder that even though they had made progress, the Cricks still held the upper hand in many ways. But there was something else, something he hadn't fully realized until now. The galaxy had been divided for so long. Each species had kept to its own, often in isolation. This war was not just about defeating a common enemy, it was about bringing them all together. Ryan turned as he heard footsteps behind him. Admiral Solara had followed him, and now stood beside him, staring out at the stars as well. "The Cricks have shown us our weakness," she said quietly. "They've shown us that we're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting for something more: unity." Ryan smiled, his first real smile in days. "You're right. If we can unite the galaxy, we can defeat them. But how?" "By leading with hope," Solara replied. "By showing everyone that we can work together. The Cricks are strong, but they've never known unity like ours. They rely on fear and destruction, but we have something they'll never understand: strength through cooperation." The next phase of the mission was set into motion. A diplomatic effort began, with General Ryan and Admiral Solara taking the lead. They reached out to the leaders of the galaxy's most powerful species, asking them to join the fight against the Cricks. Some were hesitant, their scars from previous battles with the Cricks still fresh. Others saw the potential in the humans' newfound strategy. Slowly, one by one, more species joined the cause. One of the first to agree was the enigmatic Zornan, a race known for their ancient technology and vast knowledge of the galaxy. The Zornan had been reclusive for centuries, but the humans had managed to forge a bond with them, offering not just military support, but a shared vision of a peaceful future. In return, the Zornan shared their advanced technology with the humans, enhancing the strength of their fleets. The Dracarians, a fierce warrior species known for their agility and strength, were next to join. They had suffered tremendous losses to the Cricks in previous years, but seeing humanity's determination to fight back sparked something inside them. They agreed to lend their warriors to the cause, offering their expertise in ground combat and defensive strategies. As the new alliance began to take shape, the hope of victory grew. It wasn't just about firepower, it was about the strength of a united front. Each species brought something unique to the table, and together, they were more than the sum of their parts. For the first time in the war, the Cricks began to notice a shift in the balance of power. The new alliance began to press forward, taking back lost planets and reclaiming territory that had once belonged to the coalition. Each victory was hard-earned, but it was a step closer to defeating the Cricks. And with every battle, the galaxy's forces grew stronger, their resolve solidified by the knowledge that they were not alone in this fight. The new alliance was a beacon of hope, a symbol that even in the darkest of times, unity could make all the difference. The Cricks may have been fierce, but they were now facing something they had never encountered before, an unstoppable force, fueled by the belief that together, they could achieve anything. As General Ryan looked out at the stars once again, he knew that the war was far from over. But he also knew that for the first time, the galaxy had hope. And that hope was enough to make all the difference. The newly formed alliance had been a game-changer. The once divided species of the galaxy were now united in their fight against the Cricks. With each passing day, humanity's leadership grew stronger, and the combined strength of the alliance became a force to be reckoned with. But even with the unity of the galaxy behind them, they knew the war was not yet won. The Cricks were still a formidable enemy, and their resources were seemingly endless. General Marcus Ryan stood on the command deck of the flagship, staring out into the vastness of space. The galaxy was at war, and the battle would soon reach its climax. Their forces had pushed the Cricks back, but they had yet to break their grip on the galaxy. The final confrontation was imminent, and Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. They had the resources, the strategy, and the alliances, but there was one thing they hadn't yet accounted for: an endgame. "We need a plan to finish this," Ryan said, turning to Admiral Solara, who stood beside him. "We can't just keep pushing them back forever. Sooner or later, they'll regroup, and we'll be back where we started." Solara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I agree. The Kricks are not like any enemy we faced before. Their tactics are relentless, but we're no longer fighting just for survival. We're fighting to end this once and for all." Ryan looked down at the map of the galaxy displayed on the console in front of him. It showed the Kricks' strongholds, the planets they still controlled, and the areas that were now under the Alliance's protection. The battle lines were drawn, but the final push would take everything they had. "We need to strike at the heart of their power," Ryan said. "We need to destroy their command center, their leadership. Without their leaders, the Kricks will fall apart." Solara raised an eyebrow. "That's a risky move. If we fail, we risk losing everything. If we don't take them down now, though, we might never get another chance." Ryan was silent for a moment. The weight of the decision was heavy on his shoulders, but he knew there was no other option. The Kricks had taken too much. The galaxy had lost too much. The time to act was now. "Gather the Alliance leaders," Ryan said, his voice firm. "We're going to take the fight to them." The plan was set into motion. The combined forces of the galaxy's strongest species, the humans, the Zornin, and the Dracarians, would strike at the heart of the Kricks' empire. They would assault the Kricks' homeworld, where their leaders resided, and destroy the source of their power once and for all. It was a bold plan, one that would require all of their strength and all of their resources. But they had no choice. The galaxy's future depended on it. As the fleet gathered and prepared for the assault, Ryan and Solara stood together, watching the ships take off one by one. The air was thick with anticipation. The Alliance had grown stronger since the beginning of the war, and now they would face the ultimate test. The Kricks had underestimated humanity once, but now they would see the full might of a united galaxy. The journey to the Kricks' homeworld was long, but the Alliance pushed forward with determination. As they neared the planet, they encountered fierce resistance. The Kricks had fortified their homeworld, ready to defend it with everything they had. But the humans, along with their allies, were ready. They fought with every bit of strength they had, pushing through the enemy's defenses and making their way toward the planet's surface. General Ryan led the charge, his fleet maneuvering through the enemy's fire as they made their way toward the heart of the Kricks' empire. The battle was intense, but the humans and their allies fought with a determination they had never known before. Each victory, no matter how small, brought them closer to their ultimate goal. As the fleet descended onto the planet's surface, the final confrontation began. The Kricks' forces were entrenched, their leadership well guarded in a massive fortress. But the humans and their allies were not deterred. They fought their way through the enemy lines, determined to reach the heart of the enemy's power. Ryan, leading the charge on the ground, felt a surge of energy as he saw the enemy's stronghold in the distance. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for, the final battle for the galaxy's future. The fight was brutal. The Kricks' soldiers were fierce, but the combined strength of the Alliance was overwhelming. Ryan and his team pushed forward, cutting through the enemy's defenses and getting closer to the heart of the stronghold. Every step was hard-earned, but they were getting closer. When they finally reached the Kricks' leadership, the battle turned into a desperate struggle. The Kricks' leaders, powerful and ruthless, fought back with everything they had. But the Alliance was ready. The Kricks had been ruthless in their conquest, but the Alliance fought with something they could never match: hope, unity, and a belief in a future free from the tyranny of the Kricks. The final blow came as Ryan and Solara breached the command center. The Kricks' leadership was taken down, their power shattered. The Alliance had done the impossible. They had struck at the heart of the enemy and won. As the battle ended, Ryan stood among the ruins of the Kricks' stronghold, his heart pounding with a mix of exhaustion and triumph. The war was over. The galaxy had been saved. The victory was not just about military strength. It was about the strength of unity, the strength of hope, and the strength of humanity. They had answered the call, and in doing so, they had changed the course of history forever. The war had ended, and the galaxy was forever changed. The Krix, once an unstoppable force, had been defeated. Their leadership had crumbled, and their empire lay in ruins. But the victory was not just a military triumph. It was a victory for hope, unity, and the strength of all the species who had come together to fight. General Marcus Ryan stood in the heart of the new Galactic Council headquarters, surrounded by leaders from across the galaxy. The once divided species had found common ground, united by the shared experience of surviving the Krix's relentless assault. Now they stood together, not as separate races, but as a united galaxy determined to rebuild what had been lost. Ryan looked out across the room, where the leaders of the Zornan, Dracarians, and humans, along with representatives from other species, discussed the future. It was a time of rebuilding, but also a time of reflection. They had fought for so long, lost so much, but now they had something even more powerful, a future of peace and cooperation. Admiral Solera stood beside Ryan, her eyes focused on the discussions unfolding around them. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she said quietly. Ryan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We've lost so much, but we've also gained so much. We've learned the true meaning of unity." "It wasn't easy," Solera replied. "But sometimes the greatest challenges bring out the best in us." The newly formed Galactic Council was tasked with overseeing the reconstruction of the galaxy. It wasn't just about rebuilding cities or restoring fleets. It was about rebuilding trust. The war had shown that despite their differences, the species of the galaxy could accomplish the impossible when they worked together. And now, they had to make sure that those bonds of unity didn't fade with time. As the council discussions continued, Ryan reflected on the long road that had brought them here. He thought back to the early days of the war, when humanity had first joined the fight. They had been outmatched, outgunned, and outnumbered, but they had not given up. They had adapted, learned, and found strength in their alliances. Together, they had defeated the Krix, proving that no enemy, no matter how powerful, could stand against the will of a united galaxy. Now, the work of rebuilding began. The coalition of species that had fought together must now work together to rebuild what the Krix had destroyed. Planets that had been ravaged in the war needed to be restored. Economies that had been shattered needed to be revived. The people of the galaxy, once living in fear of the Krix's oppression, now needed hope for the future. Ryan walked over to a map of the galaxy displayed on a large screen. The regions that had been once controlled by the Krix were now part of the Galactic Coalition. The work ahead was daunting, but there was a sense of purpose in the air. Humanity, along with their allies, would be instrumental in the rebuilding process. They had proven that they could stand together, and now they would prove that they could rebuild just as strong. The Zornan had shared their advanced technology, offering solutions to restore power to the war-torn planets. The Dracarians had helped train peacekeeping forces, ensuring that security was restored in even the most dangerous regions. And humanity, with its creativity and determination, was leading the charge in rebuilding the infrastructure of the galaxy. But the most important work was the rebuilding of trust. The war had shown that while the species of the galaxy had their differences, they were stronger together. They had learned to rely on each other, to trust in each other's strengths, and to fight not for dominance, but for the survival of all. A new era had begun, one of cooperation and peace. The pain of the past would never be forgotten, but it would no longer define them. Instead, the galaxy would move forward with a shared vision for a future where unity, hope, and respect were the foundation of their relationships. Ryan stood with Solera, watching as representatives from across the galaxy began to sign the new Treaty of Unity. It was a symbol of their commitment to the future, a future where the lessons learned from the war would guide their every decision. The treaty was more than just a piece of paper. It was a promise that the galaxy would never again fall into the darkness of division and war. As the final signatures were added to the treaty, Ryan felt a sense of peace wash over him. The war had been long and painful, but it had brought about a new beginning. A beginning where the galaxy's greatest strength wasn't in its weapons, but in its ability to work together. The Kricks were gone, but the galaxy's future was just beginning. "Do you think they'll remember what we've done?" Solara asked, looking out at the galaxy's leaders. Ryan smiled. "I think they'll remember that together we were unstoppable. And that's a lesson worth remembering." As the council meeting came to a close and the representatives left to begin their work, Ryan and Solara stood side by side, looking out at the stars. The galaxy was no longer a place divided by fear and war. It was a place of hope, of unity, and of a shared vision for a brighter future. And for the first time in a long while, Ryan felt that everything they had fought for was worth it. The galaxy was finally at peace.